Our presenter today is Dan Hickman. He is the CTO of ProModel Corporation. And prior to becoming the CTO, one of his former roles was that of product owner for Enterprise Portfolio Simulator, which we also call EPS. Along with Dan, we have Kevin Jacobson on the line with us. And Kevin is the current product owner for EPS. Now, with that, I will turn the time over to Dan for this presentation on predictive versus prescriptive analytics.
All right. Can you hear me okay, Rochelle?
I sure can.
All right. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks, everybody, for signing up and showing an interest in this topic. Wanted to start out with, how I got here and the topic itself. Every year, the ProModel team, we sort of reflect on our products, and one of the ways we do that is to look at Gartner reports. And I was reading the Gartner report on predictive analytics, and a slide caught my attention, which I have on my screen right now. Gartner breaks analytics into 4 pillars: descriptive, diagnostics, predictive, and prescriptive. And I had never heard the word prescriptive before, but I know, EPS is 8+ years old at this time. I've done sales demonstrations, I've done training, I've tried to communicate to people what it does, and I've often found that to be pretty difficult, particularly how it's different than just a regular old predictive analytics tool. And so when I saw this laid out this way, it resonated with me, and internally I started, saying to people, wow, have you heard of this word, and doesn't it fit very nice with what EPS was designed to do? So I thought, let me spend some time in the beginning here just kind of going over it and make sure that everyone completely understands the 4 pillars. So Gartner would say that your y-axis here is value, and the x-axis is difficulty. So from left to right, it becomes more valuable but more difficult for software to do it. So on the lower left here is descriptive analytics, and they have also this element of time here. So descriptive analytics typically looks at historical data and summarizes it. And I would say you see this as a form of a dashboard in a lot of products. And I think the Gartner report says that 85% of software products will have some form of descriptive analytics. And it's all historical. Now, a lot of times what you're surfacing might be bad. Could be good information, but it might be bad information. So the next phase is really diagnostics, and it's looking at that historical data and trying to tell the user why something's bad. But again, it's just dealing with history. And then the next phase says, well, let me look at that historical data and let me project forward a little bit. And that's predictive analytics. And then the next phase is, well, it's not enough just to tell me how to trend forward my history, but what if that history's bad and I want to make it better? How do I design my system to be what I want it to be? So prescriptive analytics is the utilities and the tools to help you design your future to make that future happen. And EPS, when I reflect, we were looking at it, 8+ years ago, and I was a product manager. I was a manager of development projects, and this was something that was very hard to do, of how do I design a project or how do I design a portfolio of projects. So to kind of hammer the point a little bit more, I thought, let me show you something that's not necessarily in the PPM space, but something that I think almost demonstrates all 4. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's called Google Trends. And let me click on this real quick. So Google Trends is a utility that Google offers that lets you know how popular over time certain keywords were. So for this one, I've entered in PPM, Agile, and Microsoft Project. And so this red line here is Agile, the blue is PPM, and the yellow is the keyword Microsoft Project. So from 2005 till now this is summarizing all that historical searches that people have put in and how popular they were. And what's interesting, so this is an example of descriptive analytics. And then you'll see all these letters, which is this checkbox here for news headline. So there's a bump on the Agile one. And so what Google is trying to do here is they're trying to look into their database and say, well, can I tell you maybe why there was a spike in this popularity? And they found a Forbes article that kind of says the U.S. Army, eyes more agile modernization approaches. And you can, so that's an example of diagnostic, the why. And then right here they have a checkbox for forecast, which is your predictive analytics piece. So if I check that, you get these dotted lines, all right? And so this is just looking at history and projecting forward what they think the popularity of those search terms will be. And this leaves you off at the prescriptive. But if I was the MS project guy and looking at the, that keyword, it's definitely trending down. Prescriptive would be the tools and utilities that help you fix that problem. How do you reverse the trend? How do you make it better? And that's not in this tool right now, but there are, different tools to help you do that. And I want to kind of take you to another site here, if I find it. So I said it earlier before, I was almost disappointed at myself that I'd never heard of prescriptive analytics and felt like maybe I wasn't doing my job of staying on top of words and that. And then I put those predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, and descriptive inside Google Trends. And what's interesting, you see predictive analytics as a search term has been around for a very long time, but prescriptive and descriptive is relatively new, so I felt a little better. But I really like the separation of those two words. And I'm going to spend most of the time in this webinar sort of talking through the differences of those. All right. So in the PPM space, I tried to categorize features of different tools that are out there and place them in the right pillar. So this matrix here, a little eyesore, so I'm just going to zoom in on the first two, descriptive and diagnostics. So I'm assuming if you're interested in going to this webinar, you probably have some kind of PPM tool at your organization. And hopefully as I talk through these, you can sort of think about the features that are in it. Most of them have dashboards. Almost every PPM tool that we've used, because I am the CTO, I manage the portfolio of products that we have here. We've used Microsoft Projects Portfolio Server and some other ones. And they definitely have like the portfolio dashboard, list all the projects, and every project would have like a green, yellow, red circle next to it. Green mean everything's great, yellow, you're maybe over budget a little bit, you're running a little bit behind, and red being way over budget, way over time, or something like that. Resource health would be kind of similar. Maybe you're overutilizing someone. Maybe there's what you thought was available is not available, and same thing for cost and revenue. And then on the diagnostics piece of it, I struggled kind of filling this one out, but I know in my world, in the software development world, we use Scrum, which is an agile approach, and we have this burn down chart. And what you do, let's say we do 2-week sprint, and at the beginning we would say, I think this is going to take like 5 days. We basically estimate all the different tasks that we might do. And at the end of it, there's a post-mortem, there's a reflection period, and we have reports that show planned versus actual. So I might have estimated that it was 5, but in reality it took me 6 days, or in reality 7 days, or maybe in reality 2 days. So the reason that I didn't meet my timeline is because of bad estimates. Or maybe I assumed that I had some availability of resources that didn't happen. Maybe someone left the company. Maybe someone got sick. Maybe I didn't anticipate vacation time that someone took. And so I didn't have them, and so I got behind schedule. But these are the two that I want to focus on. On the left-hand side is the matrix for predictive, and on the right-hand side is the matrix for prescription. And so on the predictive side, I'm starting to think about this as if I can put the words is a forecast of. So all these tools can forecast revenue, can forecast throughput. If I'm forecasting it, it's a prediction. So start and finish dates, resource demand, resource utilization, cost, revenue, throughput. But then there are certain techniques or features of the software that help me predict better, like Monte Carlo methods. The ability to say, well, I'm not sure if it's going to take 5 days. It might be 2, could be 5, might be 7, or kind of some PERT analysis type things. And one of the major features for EPS over the years has been our ability to model project attrition, which is the probability of something surviving through a certain stage gate. And what that allows us to do is better accurately predict revenues and throughput and resource utilization, because projects will actually fall out just like they do in real life. Now let me contrast that to, on the prescription side, it's which project should I do? When should I start it? How do I prioritize my projects? What's the capacity that I need if I want to do portfolio A or portfolio B? Which resource should I use? If I want a certain value out of my portfolio, how much budget should I spend? So hopefully you can kind of see the difference. The way I look at it is, on the prediction side, it's a lot of outputs, like those dotted lines that you saw in the Google Trends. But on the prescription side, they leverage the predictive information through dials, like say on a dashboard, but they have interactive levers, like this red switch that you see here. I can actually play with that and see an impact. I can play with, I can manipulate the dials to get different predictions. It's about trying to figure out what the best solution is. So, like I said earlier, ProModel has leveraged Microsoft Project Server, the portfolio server tool. Certainly, these are my opinions here. I'm sure that someone can maybe challenge a few of them, but I think I'm pretty close. They definitely have dashboards, so they definitely have the descriptive piece. There are various different diagnostic tools in there, like 10 different baselines. You could take a snapshot of your project file and then compare that against the actuals that happened and sort of reflect on it. On the modeling side, every PPM tool has a scheduling engine, so everyone's predicting start and finish dates, and I'm going to talk about that quite a bit in a minute. I'm unaware of any sophisticated Monte Carlo techniques. I think there is some PERT analysis in there, so maybe I could have put a small x in there. A great feature for EPS, like I said, has been our attrition capability, and we often, win sales because MS Project cannot do that piece, which gives us better prediction, so they don't have that. Recipes, I'm going to hold that off to a later section, but I know they don't have that. They definitely help you predict demand and utilization and cost. I don't think you can apply revenue to projects, and I'm unaware of any throughput capabilities that they have. And on the prescription side, their portfolio server tool, they definitely can tell you which projects, but unfortunately they can't tell you when to start the project. They just say, oh, they assume that your start dates in the server are what you want them to be. They definitely have some business criteria, some business drivers and ranking so that you can score your projects, which drives a priority. I'm unaware that them recommending a certain capacity so that you can do portfolio A or B. And they definitely allow you to put in a budget and say, well, if I spend this much, my value of my portfolio can be this much. So efficiency frontier type capabilities. So that was sort of ProModel's thinking, 8+ years ago, was there is an unmet need in the PPM space. And this diagram that you see up here is a PPM life cycle. It's pretty generic. It's not, it's not a one-size-fit-all, but I think this is pretty close to how most of them work. So let me explain it. On the left-hand side, you have various different roles. There's certainly more roles, but you have a PMO, investment manager, a program manager, a portfolio manager, project manager, and each one of the lanes are some of the functions that they would perform. On the upper right here, you have the different stages that PPM goes through, an initiation phase, a planning, an execution, and a close. And basically, many corporations will do maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's yearly, maybe it's bi-yearly, but there's some kind of cadence to which they'll do their PPM. So if I start in the upper left right up here, and I would say let's say it's the start of a PPM cycle, that organization will have a portfolio of projects that they're actively working on, and they're at a certain health. And then during the in-between time of their last cycle, there's been a whole bunch of good ideas generated and new product, new investment ideas. And so what people do is they gather all those projects up in the initiation phase, and they basically try to make a decision of what their next portfolio should be. Should I shelve a project? Should I kill the project? Should I take on a new project? Maybe I've changed my strategies as an organization and I want to kill a few projects. But there's a lot of information that goes in here, such as, well, if I do want to pursue a certain portfolio, which types of skill sets do I need? Do I need to invest in skills? What kind of budget do I need to make? Things like that. Once they approve their projects, the portfolio projects, then all the new projects, they'll get a charter, they'll get a plan. That's where the project manager comes in. They'll start executing that individual project, which feeds into the portfolio management tool, and there you start getting your dashboards of health, red, yellow, green type status for all the projects in there. And so these yellow little bars for us represented a place where we felt it was weak in the predictive and prescriptive capabilities. And EPS was designed to sort of plug into that and be the best module at doing that. Because those systems were about managing the life cycle and the workflow and the governance, not necessarily trying to design the best future state. So some of these words are borrowed from Gartner's report again. They're calling it the next generation analytics. They go into detail about the explosion of data, the big data phenomenon that's going on, and the sensors and IT systems that are logging more data than ever, and how you have all this historical transactions that's primed for predictive analytic techniques to come in and automatically scour the data and predict. But the next big phase they're saying is, well, that's great, I can predict, but what if it's bad? And there's a new set of tools that needs to be developed, which is the ability to fix bad predictions to design your future state. All right, so in some ways, I wish I would have thought of the prescriptive analytics word 8 years ago because it would have been easier to communicate, but we were doing there's three main features, well, two main features of the current version that I want to walk you through today. And then a third one is more of an R&D function, and I really want to get your feedback on it. We want to avoid the if we build it, they will come syndrome. So the first one is our scenario what if module. Now, this one is blatantly manual. We basically said, let's pull in a PPM model from one of the suites, one of the big players out there. Let's pull that in and then give them all those dials and levers, all those prescriptive dials and levers so that they can try to play with designing a better future portfolio. So let me jump out to that. All right, so I'm inside EPS now. And for those that have never seen EPS, I'm going to do a really quick dive into it. If you remember the PPM lifecycle flowchart that I talked about, in the upper left at the beginning of the project, there was all those good ideas and all in the active portfolio. And in our tool, we call that the repository. It's not a portfolio yet. All it is a big old list of all the projects that you might consider putting in a portfolio. So in mine, just to keep it simple, there are 11 potential projects that might fall into a portfolio. And, if I look at the financials, when new product one finishes, it's going to get $100,000 at the end, and there's a revenue curve attached with that. And with that, you could basically say, hey, all those roles that were in there, that left-hand side, the PMO, the portfolio manager, the program manager, they can go in and they can create their idea of what a portfolio is. And what's key for EPS is that this is just a sandbox. This is just, we encourage you to come up with lots of ideas. It's not a production system where you're very hypersensitive to people messing with it, and they could, automatically will send emails that your portfolio is officially changed. This is a sandbox for you to play in. So the PMO, his idea was 5 projects. If I drill in on that, you can see out of my repository, they've added 5. And the portfolio manager added, I think, 6. And the program manager, he chose to do all 11. And I'm purposely keeping this very, very simple. If I drill into the, all right, so why would you make these portfolios? Why do you make the scenarios? So if I go out to the reports, so before I show you like the nitty-gritty of making a scenario and all the ways that you can do it, let's start with the end here. So we have a report viewer, and we have tons of reports that you can get to on all these scenarios. And let me make sure that I select all the roles here. All right. So if you remember, one had 5, one had 6, and one had 11. And this is comparing the cost. So you can see the 11, this is my program manager's scenario. Obviously, if I do more projects, it's going to cost more. I'm going to, oops. Okay, with me? Here's our net accumulated value. And so you can kind of see that in the beginning when I have a lot of projects, I'm paying for it, but I'm getting no revenue yet. So here you can, and then eventually over time, I'll make up that cost, and I'll start being, I guess profitable. So this is one version, but you might not have the capacity to actually support 11 projects or 6 or 5 without doing some investments. So another report we can do is look at each of the skill sets that we have in our portfolio, and I'll pick on project managers. And we can compare and contrast like what their needs are. So this is prediction right here. This is saying, all right, given this portfolio, these 3 different portfolios, let me predict what the demand is for project managers. I only have 2, so I'm overutilized there. If I look at the program managers who wanted to do all 11, you can see that he's almost doubling at times, more than doubling the needs of it. So I have some tough decisions to make. So what I might do here is say, well, I can't support this. I need to go to my dials and start figuring out how to do this. Let me show you how that works. All right. So scenarios are basically, you could take a base of information. Maybe we pulled that in from Primavera or any of the PPM tools. We can bring that into the tool, and then we have all these levers, and that matrix was the one where we talked about whether the 4 pillars and what the PPM function is that's inside there. That's a pretty decent summary of all the types of levers that a portfolio manager might want. So this user interface is a very easy and visual way of getting to all those levers, and it's kind of fun to play with. Let me pick a project manager. So if you remember, we were nearly doubling. This is the same chart as before, but the difference being that now we've stacked all the programs. All these colors are different projects, and up here are my 11 that was in there. So one of the levers that I might want to play with is whether I want to do one or not. So I can just kind of turn this off. I can turn off various different ones. And when you do that, you can kind of see down below the mountain chart, we like to call it, is changing. And so the game might be here. How do I get everything to fall underneath? I don't want to do these projects, let's say, or I can move this out to the right. You can kind of see the bottom there. But I'm interactively creating a scenario, trying to fit everything. And so maybe I'm kind of frozen right there. It's a decent idea. So I could say, all right, well, let me snapshot that. And maybe I have a different idea. So you know what, I kind of want to do these 3. And maybe I don't want to do these 2. And I want to bring this back all the way here and just start playing, move him way out. All right, and I can call that a snapshot. And so, but what's nice is that I can say, all right, let me go back to the other one. Let me go back to my original. Let me go back to this one. And you can just kind of toggle back and forth. What we are trying to encourage you to do is build as many scenarios as you can. The idea is the more scenarios you have, the more you're testing you're feeling the sensitivity of your levers on that portfolio and what you could possibly do. So this is one way of creating a scenario. Another way, a little not as visual. Give this a second. is we have table views of it, and you can just say, you know what, I want to exclude this one and this one, and this always takes a second to load up the resources. But maybe on this one I want to say, you know, I want to invest in project managers. So once it loads up, I can change that. Here's my project managers. I'll put 5 of those. And then this changes tab also takes a little second to come up, but it is your prescriptive action items. It remembers all the manipulations that I've made to the base, and it itemizes them for you. So you do this, you do that, you do this. You can see I've excluded product 1 and excluded product 3, and I took the project manager and I boosted it up to 5. And maybe, this is a little advanced, but maybe there is a certain initiative like, you know, I would like to increase survival of everybody in my portfolio by 5%. So here we can kind of describe the change. And this change, if I had to do it onesie-twosies on every single task, would take a long time. But here, this allows me to just kind of describe it in a way. And so now I'm saying, all right, all tasks that have a survival percent, let's add 5 to it. And, you know, maybe there's a cost associated with that. So this is a way for us. There's multiple ways to do that, but I wanted to demonstrate all the different levers, including, excluding, moving starts and finish dates, changing any of the metadata of an individual task or a project, like its revenue or its survival, any of the work, what resources do what. All those are at your disposal so that when you create a scenario, you can go to reports and you can see them against each other and compare and contrast and do that trade-off analysis. All right, so that is one way of doing it, and it's very manual. If you were to Google prescriptive analytics, the poster child is optimization. There's no doubt about it. And so let me demonstrate. We have that also. So if I go into my scenarios and I pick one of these and drill in, we have this optimization tab. And this also takes a second. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer, hey, this is what I want you to maximize this, but while doing X. So usually it's, you know, maximize my net present value, but I only want to spend $1 million a month. I only want to, you know, I want to maintain my cost at $1 million a month. So here's our list of all the things that we can do. I'm going to select greatest net present value, but you can see like earliest prioritized finish, earliest total finish, highest project throughput. So I'll do the MPV, and I'll just keep it at that. And when I hit go, what this will do now is in a minute it's going to start kicking in, and you have your top 20 recommendations, but it's going to run hundreds of scenarios. So I'll just kind of sit here for a second while it starts to kick in. So we've done 3, 7, 13, 20, and it's always maintaining the top 20 of those, 46, 54. And so if I click any one of these, there's those same prescriptive to-dos that I showed you before, except instead of me manually going in there and figuring it out, the computer is sort of doing that for me. Here it's saying, exclude these 2 out of the 11, move these start dates. And something about moving those dates left and right has allowed it probably to keep the cost down, monthly cost down, or something like that. So we're at 219 scenarios in 1 minute. But I think you get the point. We can continue to let this run and have it converge on the top 20 answers. And then any one of those answers that I can take, I can just hit this button right here, and it makes it an official scenario. And now those will show up in all those reports that I showed you before, where you're showing the cost over time and the resource units over time. All right, so I'll stop that. All right, so that's the optimization piece. So now I want to sort of switch gears a little bit and, you know, really take advantage of you guys signing up for the webinar and to talk about some things that we're doing, more of an R&D type function, but I do have things to show you. So ProModel is a modeling simulation company, and we did not start out in the PPM space. It could be aerospace, manufacturing, drug discovery, pharmaceutical drug discovery process, loan applications, service industry. And we know what our strength is over there. People come to us because they have a complex system, and our tools can take those very complex business rules and model them accurately. And what's interesting to me as I reflect on where the current state of EPS is there's not as many levers in there to do the really, really complex things. And I think the reason is the industry as a whole has adopted a standard model. And I'm just going to call it the PTRDA. The P stands for projects, the T's for tasks, the R's for resource, the D's for dependencies, and the A's for assignment. And no matter what tool I've ever evaluated or used professionally at ProModel, pretty much I build a portfolio model of projects with those terms. And I know that I'm right on this because every one of those tools have an import or export to MS Project where you can export it to a file and they pretty much describe it in these terms. And that other tool can take that same file in and not lose any information or capability for the most part. So, so the good of it is if you know one tool, you know them all. And the really good thing from ProModel's perspective is there are tons of portfolio models. If you think about all the users, all the PPM tools out there, with these big servers, and there's tons of portfolio models. People have been defining portfolio models for a very long time. The problem, though, is that it's a constrained model. It can only do what's in those five words. That's the only thing that it can model. Anything that breaks outside of those description, it's not as accurate, and which I would say limits the prescription and the predictive art of the possible. So in the R&D group, we're sort of thinking about, all right, well, can we consume one of those portfolio models, the thousands and thousands that exist, but enhance it and break free of the standard of the project's resources, tasks, dependencies, assignments? And we've come up with this idea of recipes, which I'm going to go into right now. So if I reflect on what ProModel does outside of the PPM space and what my needs are as a CTO or a product manager, there's one that comes, it's like the poster child for me, is that I can go inside MS Project right now and define a development task for a product, and I'll hit a barrier really quick. Very common is to say, hey, I have a task, and at my disposal is maybe a senior dev, a junior dev, and a bunch of entry-level devs, bunch of all those. And the tool's expecting me to enter in who's going to work on it. Well, technically speaking, I don't know who's going to work on it a lot of times until the task in real life comes in. So what do I plan with? Do I plan as if I'm going to be a senior, or do I plan as if I'm going to get a junior or two entry? And how I plan in advance of the decision is vital to driving a good resource demand cost utilization. And so what I'm going to, the nerdy explanation of this is that I want to say or. I want to say I'm not really sure, but I'm going to, if I get the senior guy, it's 10, I want one of them, or this or that. But all the standard model dictates is that it's an and I put a screenshot here inside MS Project of one of their templates where it says this one's going to take 1 week, this task, develop preliminary investigation plan. But, and it puts 2 resources on it. Now, this is an and. They both could work on it, and if they both work on it, it could get it done a lot faster. But it's never an or. It's not like it chooses to do one or the other. If they're both available, they'll both work on it, whereas I want it to be a choice. So that's one very dynamic thing that's impossible to do in the standard model. Another one, and I've worked as a consultant on this product, on something like this for one of our pharmaceutical customers, is let me say hypothetically, I have 100 projects, and those 100 projects all follow this template of 3 stage gates, where every one of those stage gates have 3 tasks to them. And I want to say that out of the 100, the first 5 belong to this concept of a program. We're going to call it Program 1. So what they want to do with programs is sometimes they know how many they want to put into the program, and they know how many they want to get out the back door. And they also want to control costs over time of doing those projects. So one thing that they wanted to do is say, let's let all 5 projects start at the same time. But the first project to stage 2 of the 3, first one to successfully reach there, then have it reach out and terminate the rest of them. I don't want to pay for them anymore because I only want one out the back door. Use case 2 is very close, but it's saying, hey, when 2 of the 5 projects reach stage 2, then terminate the rest of them. If you think about use case 1 and 2, they are, by letting all the projects work at the same time, they are accelerating trying to get it out the back door. The possibility of getting their 2 or their 1 or their 3 or whatever it is. Use case number 3 is a little different. It says, hey, I've got 5, but let project 1 go. If it fails anywhere, go to project 2. And if it fails anywhere, go to 3. And if it fails, and the risk there is if 1 goes through 100% and makes it through without failing, well, then we're good. But if it does fail halfway through, you never make up that time. So you sort of lose that parallel operation. So I have yet to see any tool that can model anything like that. And if you're a large organization with lots of projects and you have a program mentality, this is something that would be vital to predicting throughput or your cost or your revenue projections, things like that. So, and I debated not putting this slide in here, but it's very nerdy. But I think I want to that the computational technique used is important in this discussion. So most of the PPM suites that are out there today are going to use some kind of RCPSP algorithm. Like on an MS project, it's work equals duration times units. That's the heart of that formula, and some slack. And so it's a mathematical model. And some of the more sophisticated one might use regression or clustering or neural networks. And those are models that purely look at the historical and build mathematical models off of the historical information. And EPS, from day one, has been a discrete event simulation. And the event part is the vital piece, because we actually do have an internal clock that progresses over time, and the individual events actually do happen. And what that allows us to do is to have places where we can put in rules, your custom portfolio business rules. So let me give you a demo of this. All right, so I told you that this was a R&D thing. So let me, no, that's not it. All right, so right back where we left off before, but I have a repository. In this repository, I've got 8 projects. And you can see here that I've defined an attribute. And in the attribute, I've basically said what program you belong to. So the first 5 projects belong to program 1. You'll notice that there's a new tab in Setup, if you're familiar with EPS, called Variables. And I made these. And just to give me a story, I made one called Barrels of Oil. Maybe you're in the oil industry. And we'll go over why I called it that in a minute. I also generically said, this is just some metric. And even more generically, I called one Variable 1. So now if I go back to my repository of projects, and there's a new tab. So there's a new thing called Variables, and there's a new thing called Events. And what this is doing is it's surfacing that discrete event piece of our technology. And here, projects have 3 events where you can put in custom recipes. I could say, and a recipe is just a manipulation of variable with if-then type of logic. So let's just say you're in the oil industry, and you, at the completion of every project, maybe there's a, you can expect to increment some variable like barrels of oil. So project 1 gives me 25 barrels of oil. Project 2, 75. Project 3, 135. And project 8, 25. And and we have now in our reports, and I'm going to show you this in a minute, that when we hit run and we actually forecast out into the future in this in this model, based on the actual time that this project will physically complete in the model, then we'll increment this barrels of oil, and then when you get on the reports, you get reports that probably you weren't even capable of getting before. That's the simple one. If I just take it up a notch more, you'll notice that there's a terminate event. So whenever this project fails, we want to do something to a variable. And I'm just showing some very simple if-then, and not the best example in the world, but if this project belongs to program 1, then let's increment some metric by 35. And maybe this is some kind of bad, like an opportunity cost type metric, because I'm terminating, that's generally a bad thing. So, but if it's part of program 2, then I can increment it by 75. And again, now when I go to my reports, I can, hit the space key there, I can see new reports that didn't exist. So those are both very easy, just more metrics, like enabling reports you couldn't do before. But now I want to get into some more behavioral things. Because the idea here is that sometimes your prescription is not things that you can manipulate in a table. It's not just a drop-down where you say yes or no. There's things that are business logic that you want to put into there. And so I drilled in on the first project, and it had 3 subtasks, just like the PowerPoint said it did. And now tasks also have events: a started event, a past event, a failed event, a finished, and a terminate. All those places when it will trigger running some recipes when that actually happens inside the module. And here, it's a pretty sophisticated one. So what I'm showing you, I realize, is not simple, right? For some people, coding is very hard, but so is the custom logic that maybe makes your portfolio unique. So the question that ProModel is asking is, we don't want to just build it and then hope you'll come. We want to say, hey, this is what we do as a company. We are very good at creating modeling and simulation tools. Is there enough value where you would live with some of the complexity so you could represent your portfolio more accurately, which opens the door for more predictive and prescriptive capabilities? But let me kind of go through this logic here, where this is the use case of 5 projects in a program. When 3 get past stage 2, kill the rest. And so I'm just incrementing a variable. So the very first guy, it could be a race to stage 3. The very first guy gets it. This global variable is going to be 1. Next guy is 2, and the next guy is 3. On the third guy, the very next line says if the variable is equal to 3, greater than or equal to 3, and we have these system functions now, so I'm right here, I'm saying, at this time, let's look at the state of my portfolio in simulated land, right? And say, let me loop in all the projects that are in there. If they belong to program 1, which is what I'm interested in, and it hasn't finished yet, then I want to terminate it. The highlighted line is the key here, is that this is something the code is actually changing the structure of your portfolio. So I don't always have to predefine what my projects are, what my portfolio are, what my tasks are, what my resources are. I can dynamically, while it's running, impact even the structure of it. And so this would give this recipe right here, I could, store in a recipe library, and you could just drag and drop it on top. We could call it the program logic recipe, and you just drag and drop it on top of a started event for a certain stage and configure this number 3, because maybe we just want to make this, like a macro that says, how many do you want out the back door of program 1? Drag and drop it on there, you enter 3, but underneath the hood, it's got this recipe underneath it, and then you could get to that recipe and tweak it to your needs also. This is some things that we're sort of envisioning right now. But this would give us that behavior of killing the other 2. All right. All right. So showed you the events, and the key to the recipes is that you get simulated runtime access to all the metrics of the system. And so you could make, based upon the state of the system at that time, decisions. And my gut says that, I don't know everyone's complexities of their portfolio, some of them are going to be pretty complex, like some of the program logic. And my gut says that I can't design a solution that's so flexible that you could just fill out grids and I can get everything you need to get your prediction. That I have to sort of open up the engine a little bit and let you get to some of it and manipulate it. And yes, I understand it's a little harder. So here's that one custom recipe where I'm manipulating the number of barrels of oils, and here's the screenshot of the new reports in there. You can see all those variables in there, so that opens the door. And this is just tying in those two use cases. These two use cases are actually very similar. The only difference is this number 3. This would be a number 1, and this would be 3. So they're really kind of the same thing. These are some of the ideas that we have for system functions like the terminate. The other one, the opposite of the terminate, would be triggering a start. So instead of saying, oh, you're already active and I want to terminate you, maybe you want to, like in the pharmaceutical world, they called it parachuting, where they actually look inside the system and say, well, there's a gap in revenue at a certain time frame. Whenever it dips below this threshold, I want to look at my shelved projects and I want to bring them in. And instead of writing 1,000 different scenarios of exploring which ones to bring in, I could write a little script and have it dynamically decide when I want to do it, and that is my prescription is the logic itself. You can manipulate metadata on the projects. I can manipulate the survival, because maybe I want to derive survival based upon information in the past. You know, another example that we've heard from our customer base is when I do a certain type of task more than once, I learn from it and my durations get lower. And that would be something very easy to do with recipes, because we could just increment a variable that says 1, 2, 3, you know, every time you do something, whatever that is, you increment it on the finish event, and then you could have that be a multiplier onto the duration. And then now we're actually decrementing the duration over time. All right, so in conclusion, you know, the thought I want to leave is there's predictive analytics and then there's prescriptive analytics. And the predictive, I'm a big fan of. And they're going to predict the future, but sometimes it's bad. And what I want to challenge is, well, when it is bad, how do you actually design your system? What are the tools and utilities you use to make it a better system, to get ahead of that game? EPS, we think we have a pretty, 1, 2, 3 combo here of scenarios with all the prescriptive dials that you can manually do it or have the computer do it. And then when times get tough, when the logic's really tough, or you have very tough prescriptive logic with custom recipes. So my name's Dan Hickman. Thanks so much for joining me on this. Can't wait for the Q&A that's about to open up. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And if you have an example of something that you've been struggling to model in your portfolio with traditional tools, I'm dying to hear from you and sort of put that into our design. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Dan. I have just unmuted the phone lines. You guys can all bombard him with questions.
Hey, Dan, is there any timing on the recipe stuff that you guys are working on?
No, there's not. I like two features, where there's scenarios and the optimization. That's out there right now. With the recipes, we're just trying to avoid the, make this huge investment and then, maybe there's not a need. And I'd rather just reach out to people and figure out, hey, yeah, I'm interested in that. So I think that's going to drive it if people express an interest.
All right. Well, if that's it, then I guess we'll thank you for attending.
Yep.
Speak up if you get anything.
Yeah, thank you. This was very helpful.
Good. Thanks for coming. Thank you all for attending, and watch your email for any future webinars you might want to join us for. And have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it very much.